Hello. Welcome everybody to the Law for Black Lives August monthly webinar. We are super pumped this month to have Silicon Valley Debug, which is an incredible organization out of California, but doing revolutionary work across the country around really building community power and building it into our criminal defense, our criminal legal system, and just doing incredible power building and allyship and all sorts of dope ass work. So we're super excited for y'all to join us today. I'm gonna start with some quick tech reminders for folks. Then we're gonna jump right in to a really incredible webinar with folks from across the country talking about the use of participatory defense and how we really can use community power to stop the really mechanisms of this system that destroy our families. So for some quick tips, number one, this is best enjoyed with headphones on for sound quality. Number two, make sure you're muted. There will be a chance for folks to ask questions and give feedback one of two ways. One is to use the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions that come up, put them in as they come up, and at the end of the webinar, we will be answering questions. That also gives folks a chance to answer them directly to you if you have them. Secondly, there's a chat box. So if you have thoughts or comments or just that was dope or want to share any of that, you can use the chat box function. This, as folks know, is one of our monthly webinars. We'll be coming back next month in September with one on gender justice. But super excited right now to pass it off to the Debug team, which has been doing really revolutionary work that embodies what movement lawyering can and should be in ways that we can actually work to change our system while also helping folks who are in the middle of it. So I'm going to hand it off to that incredible team. And again, thank you all so much for joining us on this beautiful, although rainy in Brooklyn, Monday night.
Can I get a thumbs up? Thumbs up? Yeah. All right, cool. So I'm so excited. We're so excited to be able to share with you our work on participatory defense and hopefully build a movement together with the Law for Black Lives. We wanted to do just a quick intro of who we are, and also we got some folks out of Nashville and Durham, North Carolina, who are going to be joining us, who are holding down participatory defense in their own communities. So real quick, my name is Sharice. I'm an organizer with Debug.
And I am Cecilia, and I'm also an organizer with Debug.
And I'm Gail, and I'm also an organizer with Debug.
Hi, I'm Avi Singh. I'm a public defender in San Jose, California.
I'm Raj. I'm with Debug.
We have another public defender who's going to be joining us. His name is Sajid. He's coming from court. And then real quick intros from Nashville.
I'm Jacola. I'm with Participatory Defense Hub in Nashville, Tennessee.
You.
Dawn Harrington, Participatory Defense Hub in Nashville, Tennessee.
That's right. Yep.
Right.
And then we have another hub in Durham, SpiritHouse, and Andrea is going to be joining us. She's actually at the City Council meeting right now where they're honoring Umar Muhammad, who is an organizer in Durham with the formerly incarcerated folks, leading the All of Us Are None network there, who tragically lost his life 2 weeks ago, and so the city is doing a proclamation in his honor. So, so what we're going to do for the next hour and a half is that we're just going to share with you about our work, about participatory defense. We're going to tell you the story of how we got started, the principles of our work, so that when you go from city to city, you'll feel the same way as when you enter some of the meetings. We're going to tell you about the things that families do to be able to impact those cases through our meetings. We're going to tell you a little bit about our campaigns. We're going to share, the folks in Nashville, the folks in Durham are going to share their work. And then we're going to also have Avi and Sajid talk about some of the cases we've done together and how communities and defenders can really partner to impact the outcomes of cases and end mass incarceration. So we're going to share with you a screen real quick. So the first thing is, what is participatory defense? Yeah. Cool. So participatory is, there you go. So the photo that you're going to see is of the families who gather here around Debug every Sunday around this red table. Holding the pen is Gail, who you just met. And so Gail is facilitating a meeting. And what you're seeing through this is you're seeing like a glass whiteboard. And so she's leading all the other families who have cases that they're trying to talk about and strategize and get support. To the left of the photo is Blanca, and her son Rudy is at the end of the table. So she's here for a case for her son who was arrested by police. Her son Lamar in the blue shirt with an orange Knicks shirt and hat was arrested by police in Santa Clara County and was beaten by cops, and then advertently caught a resisting arrest charge, and so we're fighting his case. And then the other young lady there is Ceci, who you also met. And Ceci is fighting her father's deportation case when he was arrested in front of a Home Depot seeking work. And so we're supporting them as they beat this deportation. So participatory defense, before we used to call it Sunday meetings just for efficiency's sake, because they would happen on Sundays, but really it's the naming of an instinct, of a community organizing model for people facing charges, their families and communities, and their public defenders to impact those cases and transform the landscape of power in the court system.
Okay, so now we're going to share the story of participatory defense, sort of what were the elements that were in play that brought us to that scene that you just saw before, of families who otherwise would have been facing the court system alone and isolated, finding collective power to change the outcome of cases, and also their relationship to the system, so they weren't just under the boot, but actually fighting back and bending back and beating the institutions that otherwise were targeting other people. So if you'll see in the left-hand corner, there's almost a generic icon of a community organization. That's to represent DBUG. Not that we're a generic organization, but just to say that there are organizations like ours in every city in the country, community touchstones that work with young people and families who need to protect those who walk through our doors. And oftentimes, like our organization, those who are walking through our doors that were part of our family and community were targeted by law enforcement. And while we had an instinct about challenging police violence and racial bias of law enforcement, our work elevated to police accountability when a father of a member of ours, Regina Cardenas, her father, Rudy Cardenas, was killed by a state drug agent in San Jose. This was over 10 years ago, and it was a case of mistaken identity. It was a standard parole search. Law enforcement, the state drug agent was planted outside the house. Rudy drove by. He was loosely fit the description that they're looking for, which was a Latino male with a mustache in his 40s, which is a huge segment of the San Jose population. They chased him in unmarked cars. They gunned him down from 30 yards away in the back. He was unarmed. But that led us to getting out into the streets and fighting for police accountability. And you'll see the kind of the symbols that are emblematic, again, of what's happening in every city, where people take to the streets to fight back. And so we were part of that story for our city, where we escalated our fight to not just individual cases, but policy changes in arresting practices of downtown that were targeting young Black and brown folks, and getting some policy wins. And so we had the general playbook that said we could use collective power to push back against these institutions to protect those we cared about. But what happened was that more people started coming to us that wanted to talk about not just the point of contact with police, not just the time that they got beat or tased or assaulted by an officer or wrongfully pulled over. They wanted to talk about the fallout of what happened well after that point of contact, meaning if they were a victim of a tasing, they ended up invariably facing a resisting arrest charge or assault on a police officer charge, or they got targeted by the gang enforcement division of the police department, and then prosecutors tagged a gang enhancement charge on that, greatly escalating their sentencing exposure. So here's sort of the key part of this picture. While we believed in collective power and we knew that the science and the ethic of community organizing, we still let people we cared about go to the institution of the court alone. So all to say that we relinquished power at arguably the most critically important moment when community power could have an outcome on the case and an impact. So what happened was people we cared about would come to us and say, I have this charge. We would say, well, the court isn't our arena to make change. The streets are our arena to make change. And so we let people face prosecutors, judges, juries, history of racial bias alone. cutting ourselves off at the knees in what we thought we said or espoused we believed in collective power. And as a result, people were taking pleas they shouldn't have. They were alone in court. They were being overwhelmed, and they were having to walk this road alone. What we decided to do, though, was to be irreverent to this notion that the courts can only be changed by lawyers and judges, that there could be a seat at the table or a place on the chessboard for impacted communities, and arguably that maybe is that new element that can make a change and break it out of this sort of cycle of oppression that was already happening on a daily basis in courthouses across the country. So what you'll see is that icon ended up going and was connected to the public defender's office. We added that to the chart because while we felt that people were going alone, the reality was they were facing a prosecutor in court and a judge, not necessarily completely alone. They had a public defender like Sajid who just walked in, that was sitting next to them. But we as a community knew nothing about public defenders. All we really knew was what we heard on the streets in the community, and that we saw the fallout. And so there was all this misgivings of what a public defender was, their relationship to the community. They weren't seen as an extension of the movement. They're seen as an extension of the system. But what we decided to do was change the relationship between the community and the defender to change the outcome of cases, and also, as Sheree says, transform the powers dynamic of the courts. So what we started doing was bringing the science of community organizing to this court system that had been completely insulated from community pressure. And we would argue that it is probably the last public institution that gets the least public pressure in any city. And if we could penetrate that and bring that community organizing ethic to the courts, we can make dramatic changes. So you'll see in the kind of middle, there's the symbol of what that looked like. And we use the tools and the faculties of organizing, which is collectively problem solving, regular discipline meetings, and finding out ways to collectively move so people didn't have to walk alone. And that became innovating new solutions and changing the relationship with attorneys, and essentially not taking no for an answer. And I'm going to introduce Gail again to kind of talk about, in a more grounded way, what that actually meant, because we certainly saw changes in the outcome of cases. We saw acquittals. We saw charges get dropped or dismissed. We saw felonies go down to misdemeanors. We saw what would have been in-custody time turn into out-of-custody programs. We saw sentences cut in half. All those by having a collective community approach. In some ways, responding to what Avi Singh told us one time. I don't know if you remember us telling us one time. We went to court, and we had seen this case of a gentleman who was facing charges he never should have had to face, much less have to face that kind of fork in the road moment of taking a plea. And I asked Avi, how is it that this type of injustice is happening? And he said, injustices like this happen all the time in empty courtrooms. What that meant to us as a community organizing element was that we needed to pack those courtrooms. And so when we did that and we built relationships with the attorneys, the outcomes of the cases changed, but also the dynamic of the community and their relationship to the system changed, where there was a sense of agency that was bigger than what it was before. And what it was before was, if someone had a loan that caught a case, the most that people thought they could do is maybe raise money for a car wash to make bail, or seek out that mythical private attorney, Johnny Cochran type figure that everyone kind of hoped and prayed existed that would solve it right away. But when we actually brought the intelligence of the community to the table, it made dramatic impact on the outcome of cases. But from a movement building sense, it also created a new area where community power can make tremendous community and systemic change. But Gail, maybe you could talk about what it's like in the room, and then also what the sort of transformative powers that would happen that we saw and witnessed on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I came to debug because my son had caught a case, and he was 16 years old at the time. I knew nothing about the criminal justice system, but every Sunday I would come to the meeting. I would sit at that table, and like I knew nothing about criminal justice, single parent of 7, and I just didn't know what to do. But together, we met with my son's attorney. We found out that we could have the community presence in juvenile hall, which we put out a call to the community. People took off work that came to my son's court date. We packed the lobby and the courtroom, which held 17 seats. And by this time, I guess word got around the criminal justice community that something was happening in juvenile hall. And I can remember looking over my shoulder and seeing all these people in suits standing in the back of the courtroom. It was like, you know, where did all these people come from? But long story short, just strategizing and letting the judge know that I felt that my son, I felt that he had been treated unjustly. I felt as though his attorney didn't represent him properly. And we ended up calling him Morrison in juvenile hall, which he didn't have the courage to do, but I asked him if I had his permission to do so. And he said yes. So the judge had told me, well, you're not an attorney, you can't do that. And I said, well, I asked my son if I had his permission to do it. So my son said yes. So the judge emptied the courtroom. And I mean, it was standing room only in juvenile hall. And so long story short, by myself, I wouldn't have had an impact with my son's case because I tried. I was out there just by myself. And then when I met D-Bug and understanding the power that the community had in dealing with a court case was just powerful. They called my son the Metro Kid. Metro Kid is going to court today. And I was worried about his safety being in juvenile hall. And word got around in the juvenile system that, you know, my son wasn't alone fighting this case. He had a community behind him. And it benefited. So after my son, he ended up going to the ranch, but he had a different, people treated him different because they knew that it was just more than him fighting the case. And his, one lady told me, one deputy told me that she had never seen a counselor buy Chinese food for the whole pod, they called it, which had, I think, 9 kids in it. It was his last day of being at the ranch. So the things that I learned coming to that Sunday meeting, I just continued to come because I knew how I felt out there by myself and had no case. And the things that I learned from D-Bug and other attorneys, I just stayed to help other families.
Yeah, thanks, Gail. So what you'll see though is there's sort of this these different icons in a circle: community organization, public defenders, something that represents faith-based organizations. Basically, what we realize is if we want to make systemic change in our county, it couldn't just be one place that would be the central place that people went to make change. That there were other community touchstones that were in the same position we were, which is there were people that walked through their doors that was facing a looming incarceration. They wished they could do more and they could bring their community power to the table, but weren't sure how. And so we started doing was training these different community touchstones to do essentially what we did, which was hold these weekly meetings where people would be supported, that they wouldn't have to walk this road alone, and they would collectively problem solve and see how they could be, in a lot of ways, an extension of the defense team to bring some broader pressure to prosecutors and judges. And so we started seeing these outcomes in cases. We celebrated after the first year a sort of quantitative way to calculate the impact. So it didn't feel like we were just having this impact internally, or it was subjective, or it was romantic. We were literally seeing people out in the community rather than locked up in prison as a result of community input through participatory defense. And so we kind of took a mantra that we would say every week, which is when someone would come to a meeting for the first time and they would say, well, you know, who's a lawyer here? We'd say, look, no one here is a lawyer. This is about you being an agent of change and being an extension of the defense team. And we said, if you do nothing, your loved one is going to get time served. And that's the language that the system used to quantify time of incarceration. But if you engage and participate, you can turn time served into time saved. That's them outside with you. And after the first year, we had over 1,800 years of time saved from incarceration. That led us to finding policy places where individual cases led us to spaces where community pressure could make broader change beyond the individual case, because it was the first time community was really looking under the hood and seeing all the things that were happening within the courts that had been, like we said, totally insulated from community pressure. But when a little pressure was put on it, we can make dramatic changes on those levers. What that led to after a number of years is we said, well, there's got to be other organizations across the country that are in a similar place to us. And it turned out that a lot of organizations were in the same place we were, particularly after Ferguson, which is there was a lot of new consciousness and energy around the racism of the system. And there was energy put into point of contact, meaning with police. And then there was some energy on things like conditions in prisons and jails. And then there was some efforts on after that leg, which was reentry services and how people can integrate back into the community. But the blind spot of the movement, in our estimation, was that conveyor belt from the streets to incarceration, which was the courts. And if we could bring the energy on the streets into the courts, then maybe that's the only thing that can make those dramatic changes. And so we started meeting folks like Don, Jacola, Muffin, counterparts that we thought flew at the same altitude that we did, close to the ground with community. And we knew that they feel that this is very natural and akin to what they're already doing. And then they would expand their lens and take it on the courts. So now we're in about 15 different cities with community partners. In some places, it's a church where they're meeting. Some place is folks that are marching for Black Lives Matter that said, what do we do after we shut down Main Street? In some places, it's national councils like Don's organization. And it comes in many different forms. Yeah.
Yes. So there are three main principles that our work abides by, and I'll be short. The first one is family and community strength can play a pivotal role in stopping and reducing incarceration for a loved one and a community. To the right side of that, that's Blanca and Rudy, who you all saw at the first picture. And we see this over and over. Families come and they feel that they are alone fighting this struggle. But once they sit around that table and they're here every Sunday, they start to see the community that they start to build around their cases and around their loved ones. So they don't feel alone, just like Gail said. It's not just you walking into those courtrooms, it's the whole community knowing that they have your back. Another principle is that families and communities can be more powerful when taking the role of an organizer and agent of change rather than a service recipient. So what we say with that is that we don't provide any services for the families that come to our meetings, because we want them to be the agent of change. When we don't call ourselves a legal clinic either, because they're not here to receive any type of service. They're here to organize in their own case, and they be the main advocate in their loved one's case. To the right side of that, that's Karina Cardenas. That's Rudy's Cardenas' daughter, who Raj explained earlier. There, we formed a rally around the DA's office to bring charges to officers who had beaten up one of our families here. And it's mainly just to show that you could put pressure on the DA's office, not just it's to know that you could organize around other agents of other organizations as well. And then the third one is, by working on individual cases, communities can build the movement of directly impacted people to hold the actors of the court accountable, make systematic changes, and ultimately end mass incarceration. So by working with these families on a weekly basis, you start to notice the patterns in the system and what's broken. So when we meet in these meetings, we're at problem solving. So we're thinking of solutions to the problems that these families arrive with. And that's where we build our campaigns and just how can this work escalate to not just an individual case, but that could help other cases as well.
So when families come into debug or when we go out and train, we tell folks that all the gray spaces, those are the court procedures. And these are where all the court actors really work, right? So it's like from point of arrest, when someone comes in, maybe they get arrested, or sometimes they come in and they're already starting trial, right? So those are the spaces of the court. But it's really all the green spaces in between that families and communities can really make an impact on those cases. And those are the spaces that we hope to occupy. So for example, we're not gonna go through all of the green bubbles. For example, if someone comes in when they get arrested and before arraignment, we know that by the time they hit that first court date, the public defender is already like a lap behind the DA and pretrial and whoever is like already reviewing that police report or making that police report. So we tell the families and we work with them to document that incident and help level that playing field with a public defender by that first court date, right? So they're documenting the incident, who, what, where, when, why, and how. They're getting a list of witnesses and their contact info. So by that court date, whenever they get that meeting with their public defender, they could show that information to their attorney. We're asking them to prepare social bio information in preparation for pretrial. Some of y'all are working on bail, community bail funds in your networks and your communities. And so we're working with folks to be able to show community ties, proof of employment, school, health issues, family responsibilities, all that stuff, right? To show that that person should be out here when they're fighting their case and not incarcerated. We're asking them to start arranging that meeting with the public defender. We teach people how to show up at court and take notes. A lot of times folks don't know what PC means, what penal code is, who the actors are and stuff. And so we tell them, like, just write those things down and we'll dissect it with you. We ask them to find out the charges against them and then to start getting that copy of the police report and start documenting those inconsistencies. And then as they come through, you're gonna see all the green, what happened?
Just give me
Oh, the paper, I'm sorry. Thank you for the, for the audience participation. But yeah, so as they come through the process, and again, folks come through at any time, right, prelim or anything. So we work with that family to strategize on what the correct, or what the proper ways are to go about making change.
How do we run our meetings?
Okay, so when the family comes in, we let them know, we let everyone know that we're not attorneys, we're not paralegals, and that this is not a secured place, so we don't want the intimate details of the cases. We want, like, the charge, when the person was arrested, and let's go back. We put the person's name on the board, and we ask for an update, and that's usually what the charges are, how old the person is the person incarcerated, and we let the families know that we will send them the notes of the meeting so they didn't have to worry about putting down the particulars. There's a person that facilitates, that's me standing at the board with the black sweatshirt on, and there's a note taker. So these people are very important. So we want to make sure that you get the person's email address so you can send them the email, and then we ask them to come back the following Sunday to give an update on the email that we sent out. If we had to send an email to the attorney, so the to-dos would be find out who the attorney is. If you have the attorney's name, we can look up his email address, and then we want to, we write a short list of things that that person needs to do throughout the week, because that meeting that they come to on Sunday, the work doesn't stop at the meeting. It's something to do through the week. You need to reach out to the attorney. You need to have a meeting with the attorney. You need to know where the case is, what's going to happen at the next court date. And we ask the people to return the following Sunday to give us an update at the email that they might have sent out that week.
Yeah, so these are just some of the specifics of what the actual work is that people do in between meetings. So they go to one of these meetings, they're building a community sort of approach to dealing with the case. They don't feel alone. They know that once a week there's a place they're going to go to and get support They don't have to get sort of grind down by sort of having to endure the court case. And then they got tangible things that they can work on during the week rather than just sort of sit alone and wait for the system to do what's going to do with their loved one. So they're doing things like securing material, things like medical background, educational background, things that might fit sort of in the bucket of mitigation. They're also reviewing discovery and they're pointing out inconsistencies that they see in the police reports. And so they're another pair of eyes besides the lawyer that is more intimately connected with that community, that could identify where the police has lied or where there's some blank spots that have been fictionalized. They're also memorializing investigatory information. So oftentimes people know things that could be really helpful to the defense attorney, but that the memories fade, things evaporate. And so what they're doing is really memorializing things that could be helpful to the defense, like photos, like video, like statements. So that way the defense attorney has it when they're conceptualizing their theory of defense. They're creating mitigation packets, what we call social biography packets. You have to see an example of that on your screen. And those are more sort of invested packets that are more than just a collection of character letters. So oftentimes families might get asked in the 11th hour, so if you want to help, write some character letters. We got sentencing tomorrow. And folks don't know what to write because no one's really gone to my loved one got arrested school. And so people write kind of abstract or vague things. They write things like, he's a really nice guy, or he's really, you really should just give him a second chance because he deserves it. But what these packets do, because they've been worked on in collaboration with the attorney, is much more intentional to get at whatever the issues or concerns are that the prosecutor or the judge has. So if there's a backstory around past challenges and hardships that hasn't really been brought forward to the court and is not understood in the case file, the family oftentimes has this information that they could weave into a narrative that could help the attorney make their case so it's individual and specific, not just sort of a generic argument of why a sentence should be reduced or a charge should get reduced. Or if there's changes in future opportunities and prospects that otherwise no one else would have known about. So it could be, for example, that the alleged crime was fueled by a drug addiction. And the family and the community then has a piece of work to do, which is they're creating alternatives to incarceration, and then they're proving to the court how the family and community is going to be there and how the situation or the circumstances have changed to make sure that the drug addiction that maybe has fueled the criminal act no longer needs to be worried about. They're attending court to show the court that the person has support and backup, so the prosecutor and the judge doesn't think that this person's only an island to themselves. They're also helping the person that's in custody build a relationship with the attorney, who oftentimes everything hinges on that relationship. And if there isn't anyone on the outside that could vouch for the work of the attorney, then it's hard to build that attorney-client relationship. And so sometimes mom or cousin or whoever is saying, hey, look, I'm talking to Avi, I'm talking to working, and they're burning the midnight oil. That ends up being critical just in the relationship between the person that's incarcerated and their advocate in the courts. They're helping communication between the legal team and the family and the community be effective, purposeful, and efficient. And so what that means is sometimes that, say, mom is angry at the circumstances, rightfully so, of why their child is incarcerated, but all that anger is being kind of shotgunned at the public defender because they're not thinking about things like mandatory sentences. They're not thinking about the racial bias of the prosecutor, and they're not thinking about all the systemic reasons why this person is being forced into a false choice of a plea that they shouldn't have to deal with. And so if there's some trust between mom or the family and the relationship that's built with the attorney, there's more of a team approach that could change the outcome of the case. And then lastly, in participatory defense, communities are offering experts. So for example, in California, one way that they increase sentencing exposure is prosecutors would put a gang enhancement on a charge with anyone that's black or brown. And oftentimes, defense attorneys don't have an adequate response to whoever the expert is that the prosecutor has brought forward to the courts, which is usually a retired police officer that invariably says that the defendant is gang related and the charge benefits a gang. So what we started doing was bringing forward to the public defender's office and the defense community authenticated gang experts that the system had validated as gang members in the past. So we know that they have the credibility in that sense, but also we're in the community. We're often doing things like youth development, gang prevention, and they were much closer to the realities of that gang or that neighborhood, and had much more knowledge that was at their fingertips, where they could get in front of a court and say, hey, look, that alleged gang doesn't even exist anymore, hasn't existed in 5 years, or exists on another side of the city, doesn't exist on this side of the city. And so it became a tool for the defense attorneys to use to dismantle the fiction of the prosecutors. And so we've done the same things with things like graffiti and other charges, where there's an intellect in the community that hadn't been tapped into, that if we could just build that bridge, it could be utilized by the defense community.
So these are just some examples of the cases that we have built into campaigns. Briefly, it's in a meeting space. Individual cases allow the group to see the holes in the system and implement campaigns. So the top two pictures are of, one is Veronica holding a sign saying, yes, I'm Prop 57. The other picture is a picture of a Kit Kat program in San Quentin prison of youth offenders charged as adults. Yes, so we worked on Veronica's case. Was Christian's son, where Sajid was his attorney, and she was very supporting. She was one of the biggest advocates from our organization for Prop 57, because her son, even though at the time of the passage of Prop 57, he couldn't benefit from it, but she was still supporting this campaign, and which helped to end direct file on youth. And the bottom picture is Sharice in a rally, but that's one of the campaigns where folks were coming to our meeting spaces, but they were not talking about the conditions they were not talking about the courts process. They were talking more about the conditions that their loved ones were facing in the jail. So we created a separate meeting for families to speak about those issues, and that's where our jail campaigns started to happen. And then the other one was also people talking about bail and how unreasonable it was, and that's where we're working right now. I know Jacola is working in the bail reform. So and because of the work that we were doing in Santa Clara County, we won our bail reform here in Santa Clara County, which in short created 18 policy changes that, you know, it's starting to the Santa Clara County bail.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So we worked on that, and now we're working on the bigger state bail reform.
So just one other thing we want to bring up was kind of in between. So what Ceci just brought up is what happens when people are working on their cases, they're seeing patterns where they see, if we work on this collectively, we will make some change. And so that led to bail reform and ending direct file of juveniles, changing jail conditions. Those are identifiable policies that come out of families working directly on the cases. But there's also these kind of in-betweeners, which isn't necessarily an identifiable policy campaign. But for example, when our district attorney was charging gang enhancements on graffiti charges that was exposing people to state prison, actually the public defender talked to us and said, are you seeing this? And we said, we are. The public defender went and met with the DA's office around the legal arguments, and I don't know what those legal arguments are, but we went in the next day not to make a legal argument, but to make the argument of power from the community. And so we met with the elected DA, we brought the NAACP and all the other organizations where this DA goes to their annual banquets for, and we said, look, this is not tolerable that you would charge gang enhancements, expose people to prison commitments for graffiti. And by showing the teeth of the community around sort of a detail that oftentimes people wouldn't see or think that's just the way it is, we're able to change the prosecutorial sort of direction of his charging practice by both that inside game with the attorneys working the legal arguments, but really on the outside showing some public pressure. The other example, what you're seeing on your screen, is one of those examples where we're trying to bring the energy on the street and the consciousness on the street into looking upstream, so to speak, which is the courthouse and prosecutors. And so we made a campaign around a campaign that we did with Avi, and Avi could talk more about it later. This was a client of his, Henry Sires, and Henry Sires, who's pictured with his mom here, was shot by our county sheriffs. He miraculously survived, I think, because of the angle of his seat, but he invariably ended up facing the charge of assault on a police officer, I think merely because he survived the killing. And so this was an era where people were understanding police violence and violence of the system by hashtags of those who have been killed by police. But what we knew was those who survived the assault of the police officer didn't just walk away from the experience. They were invariably facing a criminal charge themselves. And so we made a campaign around Henry, which mirrored what we thought was happening all the time all over the country. We called it almost a hashtag. And what we did is we supported Henry and Avi in the courtroom, and we invited all those organizations that we saw at rallies, the Black Lives Matters rallies, the people that would come to City Hall when around Eric Garner and these other names that personify the moment. We said, if you're concerned then, you should be concerned now. And here's a local opportunity for you to affect change and bring some local accountability, and also save 10 years of a wrongful incarceration for him. And so this first used what we call almost a hashtag as a way to bring a kind of campaign to a visual case.
So as we said earlier, we started kind of sharing this model in 15 different cities, and so about a couple years ago. So we want to turn it over a little bit to our folks and our family. So could you take me off so we can share screen? So first I'm going to go to Jacola and Dawn. They can tell you a little bit about the work in Nashville, and then we'll go over to what happened in Durham. So Dawn, Jacola.
Cool, yeah. So it started off in Nashville in January 2016. Raj, Gail, and Drew all came and did a training at our public defender's office because our head public defender, Don Diener, here in Nashville, loves all the work that DBUG is doing. At the time, I was working at one of the largest public housing complexes in Nashville as the Family Resource Center director. And I grew up in East Nashville, where this complex is. And so I know how many folks in my family and in East Nashville is impacted by the system. And so I wanted to go. And I was just completely amazed. And from that day forward, I've been working with Participatory Defense here in Nashville. And we have condensed our meetings and partnered with FreeHearts. And Don, I'll let you talk more about FreeHearts and what we've been doing going forward.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So basically FreeHearts were based in Nashville, and we were very excited about being a part of this participatory defense when it was brought to us, because we go into the jail, and as everybody knows, most of the people that are being detained across the United States, they haven't even been, charged with a crime yet. They haven't even been convicted of a crime. They haven't been found guilty. So what we've been doing, just like last week, we went into the juvenile, we go into the jail, and we connect with the people that are facing charges. And it really blows us away. A lot of them haven't spoke with their attorney. A lot of them don't know what's going on with their cases. And so they identify loved ones that it would be good for us to reach out to. So that's where we get a lot of the people coming in, are people that are currently incarcerated and a lot of times don't know anything about what's going on with their cases. Not to mention they have bonds of $1 bazillion and don't have the money to pay to get out to fight from the outside. So one thing that we've seen, even just since we've become one hub together, is that participatory defense works. We've seen charges get dismissed. We've seen charges get beat at trial. We just had a hung jury, but we believe that is going to get beat as well. So we're just very excited to see such a huge impact already, and so much time that is already being saved for our families. Just like Debug, our Debug family was saying, we've been seeing different policies that are recurring from case to case, and it has given us basically policies that we need to challenge as a hub. So one of them is a failure to protect policy, where the district attorney in our city is prosecuting women that survive domestic violence for the actions of someone else against their children. And, we have a couple of cases that are just like that. So another one, Juvenile Sentencing, we're about to start working on that. So in that, we've been speaking out about it in the media, doing social media campaigns, and also scheduling meetings with our elected officials, our DA, as constituents and as the community, just saying, we're seeing this in our participatory defense, and as a community, we don't believe in this. We don't stand for this. As a formerly incarcerated woman, and also a person that works with other incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women, I really wish that I had this process when I was going through. I took a plea deal. I had a case in another state, and I had no idea about the process. And so I definitely know that this is a need. And a lot of people that are going through, facing charges, that, it's so overwhelming, and there are so many moving parts. And just to have the community to rally around you, that's just, it's priceless. I wish I could have had that. And the last thing that I'm going to say is that we know that incarceration and these massive arrests, just 1.5 million people alone are just charged with drug crimes a year. That's just drug crimes. It doesn't account for any other type of charges. It doesn't account for anybody in any other stage of the judicial process. And it doesn't account for their families. And we know that this disproportionately impacts our families as families of color. But we also do know that we truly are stronger together, and that's what this participatory defense is about. And we're just so happy to be protecting our people with people across the nation. So that's all I have to say.
House and All of Us Are None in Durham, what it's like?
That will be me, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been doing participatory defense since March of 2016. And actually, when Sharice, Gail, and Ceci came and was giving us our training, one of our members of All of Us and None got arrested like the second day there. And we put participatory defense to work for him, and it worked. The judge, we call him Judge Harsh, even though his name is Judge Marsh, because he always raises people's bond. And the person before Brian had the exact same charges, and his bond was $500,000, and the judge was like, "Oh, that's not high enough. We're gonna it'll be $1.5 million." So we were thinking he was gonna do the same thing to Brian, but then when he asked us, when he said, "Is there anybody in here for this young man?" a dozen of us stood up, and the judge was like, "I'm not gonna listen to all of y'all. pick one and let them speak. So of course Mama Nia spoke a SpiritHouse, and she spoke on our behalf, and they lowered his bond from $500,000 to $50,000, and he was able to get out. So then once we saw that, okay, participatory defense really does work, we did the same practices with participatory defense with I'm pretty sure everyone saw the video because it went viral, where the Durham Police Department kicked in this family door and tased everybody and had them handcuffed, and they just did a whole bunch of illegal stuff to them, but they had no idea that that family had SpiritHouse, All of Us, and participatory defense behind them. So once we started going to court with them, they wound up dismissing all the charges against everybody. So, and we have these first 24s that we worked with Debug for what you need to do when your family member comes in contact with the police. We have the who you're gonna call list, which means, like, let's say everybody should have the who they're gonna call list, whether you think you need it or not. And what your who you're gonna call list is, if you get pulled over by the police, you have one person that you call, and then that person calls like a tree of people. So you can have witnesses out at the scene, and then you can have people waiting at the magistrate office by the time you get there. And then you have, you have this whole network of people that's going to be sitting waiting for you. So by the time you get to the magistrate office, they'll say, wait a minute, it's a group of people already sitting outside waiting for this person. So we do that. We give them hell here in Durham. That's all I can say. It's like we don't give them no breathing room, and we tell all our families, we know it's going to be a long haul, but do not plead out, because 9 times out of 10 out of the cases that we've had, they've been either dismissed or they've been given community service. We've had people getting taken off of probation that have been on probation for 18 years, and we've gotten their probation dismissed. So I don't know what else to say, but participatory defense does work. You just have to follow the model and, tweak it just a little bit to work what works for you.
I wanted to answer one of the questions that just popped up about how do we market to participants, and how does the family or defendant find out? So as Dawn shared, she's in the jails with FreeHearts, and as someone mentioned earlier, I do manage the Nashville Community Bail Fund. So I'm in the jails, hearing from families, cousins, everybody, to get their folks out. So, I'm talking to them about participatory defense as well while I'm working on that. But we're also from the community, and Don and I are both Nashville natives. So, people just randomly hit me up on Facebook or wherever. They see me like, hey, my brother got locked up. Can you help Jacola? Just anywhere. We really honestly haven't did a lot of marketing, to be honest, just because, folks see me in the courthouse, and, I was at the courthouse for someone else last week, and then I ran into another community member, and I was like, okay, cool, take down my number. And then she called me today, a mom for her son that's going through some stuff who just got arrested. So it's kind of a word of mouth thing as well. And that's how it's really been working here in Nashville for us.
Yeah, thanks, Jacola.
Okay, can I answer?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Well, like Jacola said, we don't market to anyone. It just happens. It's like word of mouth. Durham has their own participatory defense page on Facebook, so people inbox us doing that. But then with us being with All of Us and None, when we have clean slate clinics with SCSJ, participatory defense has their own segment where they come in and they speak to like 300 people and let them know about what participatory defense is and what it does, and people pass it on. And we just always posting stuff on Facebook, so people are always responding saying, hey, I got this friend, can you help them? And then I be in the courthouse and people say, hey, and I used to always wear my participatory defense hoodie, but now I got this cool black t-shirt that I can wear So I wear my T-shirt every time I go into the courthouse. And so I've got the judge asking me and public defenders asking me, what is participatory defense? So I've even had attorneys to tell from us for their clients. But the first 24, it's I have it on Facebook on the participatory defense page, but I could just run off the questions, or I could just, I don't know, Sharice, how I'll be able to give them the questions that they can answer so that they can do their own first 24.
Yeah, we can send that out to through the listserv or something. So what Muffin's talking about is one of the tools that we have that we could send is it's called the first 24 that Muffin was describing. What is it that a family can do within the first 24 hours of an arrest to, one, locate them, preserve investigatory information, and also impact arraignment and bail, and hopefully change the trajectory of the case. And so we have it now in about 8 different cities or counties. And it's sort of like, we call it a justice scavenger hunt. We tell a community organization to answer like 8 questions around who do you call for pretrial, how do you find out arraignment, how do you get in contact with the public defender's office, those kind of things. They could give us back the information, we put it in the design template, and then they could make it into a pamphlet, a poster, or something they save on their phone. But we can kick that out as part of things we send out. Well, thank you, Muffin, Dawn, Jacola. Really helpful. Muffin, I hope you got to wherever you're driving to.
Well, see, I wasn't driving. I was in the passenger seat, but I was leaving City Hall because, remember, I'm glad I went to the proclamation because Umar's mom didn't make it until after they finished reading it. So I'm glad I got there, so I was able to record it for her. So
That's good.
I'm home now.
Okay, good. So what we want to do now is actually turn over the webinar to some colleagues of ours, some local heroes of ours. They're Santa Clara County Public Defenders, Avi Singh, Sajid Khan. We've worked with them on individual cases and on some policy stuff, and we're hoping you two could kind of just say what the movement looks like from your perspective.
Yeah, I'll start. Thanks everybody for having us. I'm gonna stand. So I'm just more used to standing. But families and community activists can work with us, public defenders, to humanize our clients, to help us tell their stories, and to force courts and prosecutors to look at our clients' context and not just their alleged conduct. And when we do that, we case by case, client by client, chip away at our system of mass incarceration because we breathe humanity back into our clients. And the way we do that with community members and family members is using them as part of our defense team. And I'm going to talk about some specific cases in a second. But what we really are looking for as public defenders from community members and family members, as Raj already alluded to, are some of the following things. We're looking for pictures of our clients. I mean, it's so often lost amongst public defenders, DAs, courts, that all of our clients were kids once. And so it's really important that we have access to pictures of them as children so that we can show that these people weren't born criminals. They weren't born evil. They were all innocent children once, and there is a trajectory and a story to how they landed here with us in court. It's also really important for us to gather family tree information. Sometimes it's really hard for us. Our clients are not the best narrators or biographers of themselves, and so they have a hard time sometimes articulating to us who their parents are, or for example, they may not even know who their father is, or they may only know their stepfather. We actually want to do generational social histories, and so we want to know who their grandparents are, or what are their stories? Were they addicts? Were they immigrants? Did they have struggle with poverty? So family tree information is another thing that families can help us with. Contact information for family members. Again, sometimes our clients haven't met their father, but their father is living in a different state or in a different county, or contact information for uncles and aunts that might have raised the child when they were younger. Being able to have that contact information that our clients sitting in custody have access to. Other resources could include addresses and neighborhoods. One of the things that I'm working with right now with Debug right now is on a transfer case of a juvenile young man who's charged with a gang homicide. And part of his story that I'm trying to develop and narrate to the court is the fact that he, because of his poverty and because of his immigration background, moved around so often as a child that it completely disrupted his the stability or any semblance of stability that he could have had as a child. So on Friday, I, with two Debug staff members and my client's mom and his sisters, went around San Jose to 12 different homes that my client lived at from ages 0 to age 16 when he got arrested on my case. And I got a chance, even though I'm from San Jose, I got a chance to see neighborhoods that I only really hear about or read about in police reports. And by putting my feet in the ground with the family members, I'm able to see where my client comes from, and then I'm able to tell his story so much better in the courtroom. But I only had that access because I was working with Debug and because I was working with the family. I don't think I would have given myself permission to go to those neighborhoods, start knocking on doors, taking pictures, if I didn't have kind of the family member vouching for me or working with me in that context. The other things that we require or need from family members and community members that they have access to that are harder for us to access are records, school records, report cards, mental health records, medical records, birth records, hospital records. It's really hard for us to get those things. Again, our clients aren't the best historians, so they don't know what hospital they went to as an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old when they got stabbed or when they got hit in the head or something like that. But a family member may actually have those records sitting around their house, and so Debug or community organizations can help us gather those records, and we don't have to go essentially on a goose hunt searching for them with subpoenas and things like that. The records essentially show up right in our hands. Actually, with that same client, we were talking with that mom the other day, and she mentioned that she had filed restraining orders against my client's stepfather because of abuse that he was facing. And I asked Mom, like, do you have those records? And today in court, she brought me the stack of records. And now I don't have to go subpoena them. I don't have to go look for them. And now I have them in my hand. They're actually in my bag as we speak. And I can now use those as part of his workup. Also, access to community members, coaches, neighbors, church leaders. Again, folks that our clients maybe only know as uncle and auntie, or that guy that worked with me at the local community center, or the coach. They know them as coach, but they don't know their names. So the community members and organizers can give us those names. We can then use our investigators to go contact them. And then, as Raj alluded to, is utilizing community members as potential experts too. Is this client really a gang member, or are they just a product of their environment? What does this tattoo mean in the context of where this young person grew up? What do these colors mean? What do the shirts mean? You know, the logos, things like that. Is this kid really a gang member, or is he just a poser or someone who's just trying to survive in this particular neighborhood? So that's what we really need, and that's actually where participatory members can essentially become part of our investigation team and essentially act as part of our team in representing our clients. How do we use that information? As Charisse alluded to in her slides, we use it in at the initial initial stages of the prosecution, bail hearings, being able to show that our client has community contacts, has potential in the community, has gone to school, has jobs available to him, has family members, community members that are supporting him. We also use them in pretrial negotiations, whether it be with the DA or the court. I'm a little disillusioned by our local DA's office. It doesn't seem like they care very much about our clients' context and their backgrounds, but that's okay. We're going to keep making them hear it, and then eventually they're going to, you know, as we continue to humanize our clients, then we'll make it matter to them. And it also matters at transfer hearings. Like I said, now in the state of California, we have these transfer hearings where judges, not DAs, are going to decide whether our clients, our juvenile clients, can be charged as, will be charged as adults. And the law here makes it matter, makes our clients' childhood, their environments, their family factors, make those things matter. And so we can use this information at those hearings. They can also be used at trial. So this is not just about context about the client. It's again, we can use these participatory participants in the guilt phase of the trial to help counter some of the charges that our clients are accused of. For example, it can help us develop self-defense narratives. You know, is this alleged victim someone who's known in the neighborhood as being a culprit or an offender or an assailant? Again, with our clients, are they gang members or are they not? Is there something in their history, some sort of trauma history that makes them more susceptible to provocation? For example, you know, in a homicide case, was there something that happened to them that makes them more likely to respond in a violent way because of where they grew up or their family context than the average person? So all of those things matter. They also finally matter at sentencing. They matter obviously in terms of presenting the humanity of our clients to the courts, trying to show the courts and the DAs that our clients are not just their conduct or their alleged conduct, that they are much more than that. There was a child that lays beneath, and that there's potential for rehabilitation. So being able to present to the court plans, ideas for the rehabilitation that don't just devolve to incarceration. And then now in California, we also have youthful offender parole, which means that anyone under the age of 23 who commits a serious offense that subjects them to 15 years or more of a sentence, their childhood and their environment matters. And so we actually have to put together these time capsules to be able to utilize when these folks are up for parole 15, 20 years down the line. And that's where participatory defense is really crucial. I'm going to finish with two examples. I mentioned the juvenile transfer hearing that I'm working on right now. Client's name is Fernando, and he's charged with a gang-related homicide, and Debug is helping me, one, on a basic level, communicate with my client's mother, who's a Spanish speaker. I don't have access to interpreters all the time, and so Debug is able to assist me with just basic communication. Second thing is they're giving me access to my client's neighborhoods. Again, we walk in his neighborhood, being able to tell his story, being able to show judges and DAs these neighborhoods that, again, they only see in police reports and they only hear about. And then my previous client was Christian Cotero, who was a 14-year-old, also charged with a gang-related attempted murder, who was direct filed upon as an adult. Debug helped me in significant ways. One was gathering that social bio packet of my client's photographs, his certificates, his background, letters from the community. They also created a mitigation video where they went again out into my client's neighborhoods. They got footage of where he grew up in this very notorious apartment complex. Again, an apartment complex that I'd only heard about in police reports but hadn't seen myself. They also interviewed his teachers and put together this beautiful video that I eventually presented to the DA's office as part of our mitigation pitch. And then finally, Debug actually went and met with the DA's office on the day that my client was going to plead to try to make one last pitch to see if we could adjust the offer that was being made to my client. And they, again, helped facilitate communication so that my client's mom knew what was going on, which in turn helped my client know what was going on. And that's one of the kind of overlooked things here, is that Debug and participatory defense just help with the connectivity with our clients in a tangible and intangible way. So when I am able to go talk to his mom and go to my client's neighborhoods, I can talk to my client in a much more meaningful way, and it develops this kinship between us. Now he knows that I've talking to his mom, I've met his sisters, I've met his family, I've stood in front of his house, or I've been in his house, And that makes all the difference in terms of being able to develop trust and camaraderie with the client, so that when the decisions have to be made, when they have to decide whether to take a plea or go to trial, there's a connectivity and intimacy that's been developed that helps them make a decision and helps them trust me. So that's what I have. I'll turn it over to Avi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for hearing us out on this. I'm a participatory defense convert. So I was, one of the things I just want to talk about briefly was about as you form your organizations and your connections and then start getting into the courthouse, there will be times where you face some reluctance or resistance from the defense attorney. A lot of times it's the public defender like me or Sajid, or it could be even a hired attorney. And there's a couple reasons that I think that happens, and a couple breakthroughs that have to occur. So I'm just here to tell you not to be discouraged, but to kind of find the public defender where you find him or her. You know, that they're usually, so they have a background which is about textbook confidentiality, which is that I have my client and I have the allegations and I got the judge and I got the DA and I'm ready to fight and investigate and do everything, but I'm not going to talk to anybody about anything that's happening, because usually the community for a defense attorney is against us. Not the community, it could be anything. It could be a group of people on one side, and when we take the mic, we wind up getting in big trouble, or the mob, right, is not usually in our favor. So there are just some kind of ways that we're trained as attorneys to not engage, to kind of just be living this kind of isolated existence, which actually can be really unproductive and harmful to the client relationship. It can enhance kind of unintentionally the isolation of the attorney and the client. It can keep people kind of in the dark and prevent them from kind of balancing what their goals are and trying to figure out what to do. For me, the transition, there's this idea of a difficult conversation, which is like when there's a conversation about one thing, but both sides are actually thinking about other things. So like if Raj came to me and said, how can I help, you with representing John or Oscar? And the idea would be, for me as the overworked public defender who's in the middle of a big fight, I'm getting kicked when I'm down, my client's getting kicked, and the whole thing is, I don't need anybody's help. I'm in this fight, or whatever it is. Like there's some implicit ideas that we have to break through, like that the organization is here to help the group. The community is with us. We're all united in this effort, this struggle that can involve mass incarceration. It can involve the individual clients and injustice that's happening in their case. It can involve trying to find the right or appropriate sentence that actually makes the community safe, or whatever it is. But a lot of times that conversation can just happen over starting communication when it's not specific to the case. So for example, having a relationship with your public defender's offices, like going into those organizations and trying to just meet for coffee or have training opportunities to talk about what we're about. It can be about offering up assistance affirmatively. So one thing that can really cause a difficult conversation, even though it's from the best place, is if you're thinking, well, is there a ballistics expert, or whatever it is? Is there have you gotten a handwriting expert? And that is an important question that needs to be answered, right? Clients have a right to have the appropriate experts evaluate their case. Attorneys need to go through the steps to do it. But it can be about like the time and place of communication. So like when I've talked to Raj, it's always been about like, how can we help? What's happening with the case? So much so that I will contact him directly. In the case of Henry Sires, I was so, my client was shot. He was then charged with a serious crime. And there was no question in terms of the science that it didn't happen the way people were saying it happened. And I have a mom, my client's mom, who is seeing her son, who was almost killed in the street, now sitting in chains, right? And being brought into court and brought out of court and being charged and looking at, is he going to be away for 6 years or 10 years or whatever it is? And totally without answers. And then I come to Raj because I'm trying to I can't build the relationship that needs to happen with mom in that situation where I'm doing all kinds of other stuff, and I don't have the capacity or competence. It's something that you work on. But there's this group, and they meet, and Gail's here, and there's a way to kind of answer questions and figure out, just answer questions about what the process is. Try to understand what's happening. Be present with her when things are going down. Being present with her through 2 trials. The first trial where 11 people thought she was or voted guilty for Henry and 1 didn't. And then another trial, and show up and watch and just be supportive and be in the room where it happens, right? And then talk to me during recesses about what they're seeing. You know, even if it's about, well, the officers seem to be kind of squirrely on this point or whatever it is. So I've kind of evolved just by repetition, just by seeing the open hearts of just the fully committed hearts of these people who are here. And it's unlike anything you can find in an old style criminal justice system that really works on isolation, right? It operates on people being isolated, our clients being isolated, the defense attorney, everybody, and none of it's normal, right? It's all abnormal, but we kind of do it as a routine. So if you can break the routine, if you can show up, and if you can kind of be mindful of the difficult conversations that we can kind of walk into, because the defense attorneys are on, sometimes we can be difficult personalities. And so sometimes, even though our hearts are in the right place, we have to kind of work together with communication, and it is a process. So I think that getting into these public defenders' offices, I think connecting them with other public defenders who have worked with your organizations can be a really good way to build a connection. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we have about like 10 minutes, 9 minutes. Do folks have any questions? How do we look at the questions?
I don't know. That's what I was trying to see. Okay.
Oh, I gotta mention it. Hey, while Ceci's looking at the chat, I also want to give a plug. So as you heard, Sajid and Avi are great communicators. You can listen to them talk, not just today. They have a podcast called Aider and Abetter on SoundCloud, iTunes. You can find them on Twitter. They've been getting some local media and press, but you should check out the podcast too.
So I'm gonna read some of the questions, and I think some of the questions have been answered. Give us a Twitter handle. What's the Twitter handle?
Oh, Aider and Abetter.
Ooh, I'm not that.
AIDER and Abetter.
AIDER and
ABETTOR.
Yeah, I'm seeing about the buy-in. I'm seeing questions.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think this model depends on the like some sort of administrative approval. You know, everything's case by case. I think that it's helpful to create those relationships and kind of break that mindset of we're not talking to you because I just do the thing I do. It does require some work outside of the individual case. So I don't mean to say you need to get the public defender to sign on the dotted line, but it really does help when there's a cultural shift in the public defender's offices, which is part of this. Part of this is the public defenders coming to the table too. And I think that it can be really rewarding and fulfilling to do, but we're people existing in time, and we have backgrounds in terms of our training about being risk averse, and it's just something that we have to work against.
A question is, a lot of our audience are lawyers and PDs. Can you give us some tips, advice about how lawyers can be better partners?
Do you guys want to answer that? Yeah.
How they can be better partners, be better listeners. When a family member comes to you with, well, I can get character letters. I have pictures of my loved one when he was small, and it shows his progression through life to the age he is now, how happy he was at the time when life was happening. But just be better listeners and open-minded and willing to see how you can benefit by opening up your heart and your door to let this family member in, because who better knows this person than the family? Did I answer the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it helps humanize them, like Sajid has said earlier, and that's the most important thing. What this person was before the crime happened, you know, and who this person was before the alleged crime happened.
Yeah, what I would say is that we all suffer from the same sort of like shortcuts or cognitive issues. So sometimes we rely on assessing a case with oh, well, this is this type of case, or this is that type of case. And so as public defenders and criminal defense attorneys, we have to kind of check those all the time. So that's connected to participatory defense. It's connected to everything, though.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, too, that public defenders are just as much impacted by the culture of mass incarceration. Like, we have really been conditioned as people, public defenders and lawyers alike, to use the same metrics of incarceration equaling justice. So we get the file, we look at the file, we say, okay, what's the crime alleged? How much time is the person looking at? What are the elements? Is there a suppression issue? And we kind of go through this checklist, and none of that includes the humanity of the client and what is what's going to be a holistic system response to what this person's accused of. And so in terms of how PDs and defense attorneys can be better partners is just to start to recondition ourselves and stop using those same metrics of incarceration equaling justice. And then if we do that internally, then we then can challenge those mindsets in the courthouses. And it's not going to be an easy fight. It's going to be, in terms of the long view, but we do it case by case, and we're going to keep making them listen. But I think we have to challenge our own kind of preconceived notions. And then the other thing in terms of PDs, how we can help or be better is just selling other PDs on it. Just like Avi was referencing, in our public defender's office, we have about 150 lawyers, and luckily DBUG has been in the community for a long time, and they've come to our office and done trainings. But at the same time, there is this inherent resistance. And so if one person says, hey, I had a really good experience with DBUG, you should consider using them too, or just being an advocate or voice for the cause is really significant, because there are folks like Avi and I that are believers in the cause, but then there are other attorneys that either haven't been introduced to it or have been given preconceived notions of what it is or isn't, or are just from a different generation of practice, and they are just hesitant. So just being essentially promoters for it.
I think one of our last questions, is there a directory of organizations that work with the various cities that offer the program?
Sorta. It's in the works. But in the meantime, if you go to, and maybe we could even type it in, if you go on acjusticeproject.org, that's our blog where we kind of capture a lot of the participatory defense stuff. And we'll have a listing of all the cities on that. I think it's on there already, but we'll have it up there.
It's also Denver wants to.
Oh no, AC. Wait, what?
AC Justice.
AC Justice Project. It stands for Albert Covarrubias, who we named our weekly meetings after. Albert was a volunteer at DBUG. The first person that we thought was going to be a lawyer out of this group, and he was also the first homicide in 2010 in San Jose. And so we named our weekly meetings, what Sri said, Sunday meetings, we named it the Albert Covarrubias Justice Meeting, as in honor of him. So that way, every time we work with a family, Albert's name will be raised here in San Jose, and now nationally with you all. So AC Justice Project.
If they're interested in becoming a hub.
Yeah, if you're interested, just email us or call us. Then we kind of go through a process of whatever folks need to get started. What else? I mean, I think they have our phone number, our email. You want to type your email?
Info or me? Me? Info. Me or info?
She only gives out her email on the second webinar.
Yeah. You have to come back for it.
So if you have any questions or you want to become a hub, you could email info@siliconvalleydebug.org. I'll also type in mine. My name is just my name at siliconvalleydebug.org. I help coordinate the national hubs across the U.S. Any last questions or any departing thoughts?
And I just want to say too, we were helping with this webinar, but we really, deeply respect the work that you all are doing as a collective and sort of stretching out this movement in ways that people didn't think was possible. So we're just really honored to walk alongside you and see all the strides you're making on behalf of families and communities. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Yay!
Thank
So we will send a quick follow-up email with all the goodies and the amazing information. Thank you all so much for your walk from Tennessee and just sending a special love out to Dome tonight. But thank you all so much for everything. This was incredibly inspiring and dope. I'm looking forward to following up. And thanks for joining us, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
You put our Twitter thing on
Oh yeah, what's her Twitter?
@SVDebug.